Catherine and Dave are on our side. Besides, they'll be gone soon anyway. My hand froze at those words. Hey, you really gonna do this? Do it? That sounds awful. It's an accident, just an accident. John and his wife, Jane, were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even notice I was there. My younger son's wife said to me, "Please call the police immediately, Catherine." I immediately dialed 911. I'm Catherine Johnson. I just turned 71 last month. I've spent 50 years as a homemaker alongside my husband. Thankfully, we've had a joyful journey together. We've been blessed with 2 sons. It might seem ordinary, but I truly consider it a blessing. My husband, Dave, is the second-generation owner of a small wholesale company. He took over the company his father founded 20 years ago. Thanks to some loyal clients, the business has been running smoothly. Now, both our sons work at the company as executive vice presidents. Our eldest, John, graduated from a renowned university here in the US. He's always been top of his class and other moms often praised him. I was always so proud during parent-teacher conferences. Even in college, he worked hard and graduated as the valedictorian. After that, he joined our family business, which at the time was led by my father-in-law. He was always a bit too serious, and never seemed to understand how to approach women, so I was worried about his love life. But then, about 10 years ago, he introduced us to a lovely woman named Jane. From what I gathered, she didn't come from a wealthy family. But she always smiled at me and never forgot my birthday. She'd often bring over some home-cooked meals, saying, "I made too much, Catherine." She came across as kind, thoughtful, and smart. They haven't had children yet, but I adore them both. Our younger son, Robert, is a different story. Robert, unlike John, was never academically inclined. But he was always popular with the ladies. During college, he always had a different girl by his side. He barely graduated, and instead of joining the family business, he worked in a general corporation. That's where he met Sarah. Unlike Jane, Sarah is a bit standoffish and only interacts with us when necessary. She's punctual and would send gifts during Christmas and Thanksgiving and visits during holidays. But there's always been a distance. They chose to live in the next town over, buying an apartment. I never felt the warmth in her tone. After working for about 10 years at the corporation, Robert quit and joined our family business. But he's always been quite carefree, giving Dave and John quite a headache. Still, to me, he's my adorable son. I'm sure both John and Robert will continue to do their best for the company. One day, I was shopping alone. Spring was just around the corner. I was looking for some clothes to wear at the company events. Though they call me a full-time housewife, I'm also a director in name. I rarely go to the office, but occasionally I work from home, prepare gifts for our clients, and socialize with the CEO's wife. That's part of my job. Every year, as part of that job, I attend the new employee orientation. Heading to my favorite store in the mall. That's when I spotted a familiar figure. Jane. It looked like her. But she was walking with a man. John should be at work. Maybe I was mistaken, but I couldn't help but watch them. They entered a luxury brand store. I felt relieved. I must have been wrong. Jane is known to be frugal. I've never seen her with designer items before, and both John and Robert earn as much as any regular employee. Sure, they might splurge on special occasions. While John never says anything, Robert often complains to his boss, saying, "My pay is too low. I can't buy anything. I should have switched jobs." Robert also has kids, so his budget's probably tight. Anyway, it just doesn't make sense for Jane, being a full-time housewife, to visit such an upscale store. I made an unpleasant misunderstanding. I felt silly for my mistake and left. Soon after, it was time for our company's new employee orientation. This year, we welcomed 1 mid-career hire and 3 fresh graduates. Though we're not a large company, we hire about this many employees each year. All of them were from different states this year. I hope they'll stay with us for a long time. The orientation went off without a hitch. But there was an issue afterwards. As I approached the CEO's office, I heard Robert arguing with my husband. "This doesn't make sense. You must have done something." Robert, face red with anger, was confronting my husband. John was trying to calm him down. "What's going on?" I hurriedly asked.
The accounts don't add up.
Robert shouted. The accounts? I was clueless. I asked her for more details. He explained the discrepancy in detail.
You must have skimmed off the top.
My husband shot back. Robert retorted.
Don't be stupid. This is why I can't stand second-generation CEOs. What's that supposed to mean?
The argument between my husband and Robert was heating up.
Enough is enough.
At that moment, John's voice rang out.
I'll look into the numbers. Both of you, just stop it. If other employees hear about this, it'll only cause unnecessary anxiety. Don't discuss such matters here.
John told them. You can always rely on the eldest. I was impressed by John's handling of the situation. Both my husband and Robert fell silent. I knew we could count on John. A few days later, John reportedly spoke to my husband.
There was nothing suspicious in the ledger, but there was one instance of double payment. I quickly contacted the other party, and they agreed to adjust it for next month's balance. I think that's probably why Robert felt something was off. Thanks to him, we caught the error.
Dave was clearly impressed by John's words. The brilliance with which he could discuss such a misunderstanding was noteworthy. He truly was an exceptional son, so much so that sometimes Dave wondered if he really was his own. With the busy rush of April and their earlier disagreement behind them, I was dining out with Dave. It had been a while since we enjoyed a meal together. We decided to splurge a bit and went to the top-rated sushi restaurant in the area that had recently earned a Michelin star. The dazzling dishes were a treat to the eyes.
Pretty soon, John and Robert should be thinking about treating their families to places like this,
I said, enjoying the meal.
Nah, John, sure, but it's too soon for Robert,
Dave replied.
But Robert did mention that he's struggling with 3 kids and a low salary, didn't he? If he worked as hard as John, I might consider it,
Dave said, brushing off my concern with a laugh.
Oh, come on,
I retorted, slightly annoyed. As the meal progressed, our stomachs became full. We will bring out the dessert shortly, the waiter informed us before retreating. Dave sipped his tea, looking satisfied.
Oh, I've got a call. I'll be right back,
he said, checking his phone.
Hurry back, the dessert will be out soon, I called after him.
Alone in the room, I sipped my tea, enjoying the tranquility. However, a familiar voice from the next room interrupted my thoughts.
Listen here.
It was loud and dominant. At the same time, I felt like I recognized the voice I heard.
Calm down. I told you we'd just see how things go for now.
The voice that seemed like John's responded. Was that Jane, earlier? Were they here celebrating an anniversary or something? Realizing that my son and his wife were in the adjacent room brought a smile to my face. Once Dave returned, we'd surprise them. They'd never expect to run into us here. As I waited for Dave, the familiar voices of John and Jane continued to reach my ears.
What are you waiting for?
I never expected Robert to notice. Their conversation was becoming heated. Fortunately, our room is the second to the last. I assume the voices of John and Jane from the very last room should only reach here. It's fine because it's us, but if it were someone else, it would have been bothersome. I thought we'd need to be careful. But soon, being careful would be the least of my concerns. Catherine and Dave are on our side. Besides, they'll be gone soon anyway. At that, my hand froze.
Hey, you sure we're gonna do this?
Do what?
That sounds bad. It's just an accident, okay?
The two of them were discussing so intently, they probably had no idea I was here. Or that their voices could be heard in the next room.
But first, about the money.
You can skim off a bit more, can't ya?
Last time I said it was a double payment and they bought it, but what am I gonna say if Robert gets suspicious again?
I just sat there, stunned, looking up. I didn't want to believe it. John had always been so diligent since he was young. But after hearing their conversation, I turned pale. I was certain. The argument between Robert and my husband after joining the company. It was all because of these two. They had been embezzling company funds. With trembling hands, I called my husband. But either he was on another call or just didn't pick up. Someone I could trust. With that thought, I dialed my phone again. Yes. The person answered the phone right away.
Robert?
Where are you now? Please come over immediately.
Robert, my second son. He must have noticed something was off by the tone of my voice. I'll be right there, he said and hung up. In less than 5 minutes, my husband arrived with Robert and his wife, Sarah. It seems they met outside. He probably told her that I had called for him.
What happened? Robert said you called for him.
I silenced my husband by placing my index finger to my lips with a shush. The ice cream dessert that had arrived while my husband was on the phone was now melting. I silently pointed to the room next door. The three exchanged glances. They all sat down quietly, focusing on the voices coming from the neighboring room. While my husband was away, I was alone, eavesdropping on a terrifying conversation next door. Time passed, but the two continued their conversation without stopping. The only time the conversation paused was when the waiter brought in their food. And then it would start again. Hearing about John's betrayal and its contents, I felt like I was going to faint.
Jane?
Sarah whispered. Hearing the voice from next door, my husband, Robert, and Sarah must have figured out who was there.
That's why, daffodils.
You know, if you confuse them with leeks, it can lead to accidents. Jane's voice was audible. The three probably didn't quite grasp the content yet.
At the very least, she'll be hospitalized for a while. If we're lucky, there will be a funeral. So, we have to make sure no one finds out about the embezzlement until then.
Robert let out a small, puzzled what?
So, maybe we could just wait and see?
John's voice was also heard. This conversation had been going on for a while.
No way! We can't stop the flow of money.
Jane countered John.
If they find out, they won't let me take over the company. There's no way they'll find out. Or, before they do?
They probably realized that this wasn't just an ordinary conversation. Sarah quickly activated the voice recorder on her smartphone. My husband remained silent, not saying a word. Robert was trembling.
So, daffodils. That explains why you're planted in the garden.
Yes, that's the reason. I've been bringing in dishes, and it seems they love my cooking. Even if it tastes a bit off, they'll just think it's a culinary mistake and eat it, right? I realized the true intentions behind their plans.
I wonder what I should make.
Scrambled eggs with leeks?
They have to eat a lot of it. I wonder how much insurance money they have.
Jane's cheerful voice was followed by loud laughter. Knowing my dad, he's got a hefty policy. I'll finally be the CEO.
It was worth staying quiet and listening to them all this time.
John's smug voice. Robert, consumed by anger, stood up. My husband didn't try to stop him.
No!
The one who stopped him was Sarah.
Why?
I asked Sarah. She seemed indifferent. She hasn't been very close with us, so maybe it felt like it didn't concern her. But Sarah calmly replied.
If we confront them now, it'll play right into their hands. I'm sure both you and your husband would be swayed by John and Jane.
My husband and I remained silent.
So, what are we supposed to do? They're planning to poison my dad and mom.
Robert exclaimed. To which Sarah responded.
It's okay. We have evidence. So please, call the police right away.
What? I hesitated at her words. Isn't involving the police a bit much?
This is a clear case of embezzlement. And they are planning something dangerous. It's a crime. If we let it continue, both you and your husband might.
But Sarah's words snapped me back to reality. Right, if we keep this up. The thought sent shivers down my spine. I hurriedly called the police. Sarah explained the situation to the restaurant staff and arranged for our meals to be served slower so that the two wouldn't flee. She also apologized for any inconvenience caused. Without her, Robert, in his heated state, would have probably confronted the couple in the next booth, and I, shocked and drained, would have likely forgiven them without doing anything. After a while, the sound of a police siren could be heard. Upon hearing it, Sarah went outside to guide the police. She told the three of us to wait inside as we probably wouldn't remain calm. We heard voices of Sarah and the police officers. Then, they opened the door to the neighboring room.
What's going on?
Jane's voice rang out.
Sarah?
It seemed the couple finally noticed her. John, Jane, I've heard your side of the story. I called the police because I thought it was necessary. Let's discuss this at the station to avoid causing more trouble here.
said Sarah in her calm and composed voice, which never sounded more reassuring.
What are you talking about? We were just having a regular conversation. Just imagine what my in-laws would say if they knew about this.
They probably thought Sarah acted on her own. They mentioned us in their complaints, loudly objecting.
Just because Robert isn't becoming the CEO, you called the cops to frame John? Don't lash out on us, Jane shouted.
Hearing this from next door, my husband stood up.
Dad.
Robert turned to look at him. The argument in the neighboring room continued.
For now, let's move,
suggested Sarah. Following her, an officer asked, "Would you mind coming with us voluntarily?"
I don't want to. I haven't done anything wrong,
Jane exclaimed.
Exactly. No need to go,
John added.
Oh really? I thought you had some excuse. Anyway, we're going to the police station now to file a complaint. Shall we go?
Sarah said that. She must have called out to the police. Both of them don't seem to be feeling remorseful. We had to get up and go to the police station ourselves. I stumbled a bit. Robert was there to support me.
Mom, you okay?
Yes. Robert had been quite a handful in the past, but he's grown so dependable now. We left the room. In the hallway, there was Sarah talking to a police officer, presumably heading towards the next room. I wonder if John and Jane were further down.
Mom, are you there?
Hearing our voices, John shouted. He must have finally realized we were there. His voice sounded quite frantic.
If you want to make excuses, I'd suggest you come with us. Next time, the police will be coming with an arrest warrant to pick both of you up.
Sarah, as always, said this calmly. Both of them seemed to rise at her words. In all the shock, I had completely forgotten, but Sarah had taken care of the check for us. And so, John and Jane were taken to the police station in a patrol car. We followed them in our own car. Upon reaching the police station, John and Jane, who had arrived before us, were seemingly pleading with the police, saying things like "it's a misunderstanding," and "my sister-in-law is mistaken." We could hear them even from outside the room. Another officer led us to a different room. There, I recounted everything I had heard earlier. About the embezzlement of company money. And about preparing to poison us with daffodils. I started crying as I spoke. The officer was very considerate towards me. My husband held me by the shoulders.
For the company losses, we'll need you to gather more information by tomorrow and then submit a detailed complaint about the embezzlement and the total damage.
Dave responded to the officer's words.
More than that, I can't forgive them for trying to harm my husband's parents.
Sarah said that very bluntly. I was touched by how much she cared and stood up for us. The officer mentioned that, since they hadn't actually acted on their plans, they couldn't arrest them for attempted murder. However, after listening to the conversation Sarah had recorded, it seems they can arrest them for a preparatory offense. They had actually prepared the daffodils as poison and had been serving us food until now to lower our guard. The pictures I had taken of Jane's dishes would also serve as evidence. I hadn't taken them with that intention, but it's funny how things turn out to be useful when you least expect it. Listening to the officer and hearing Sarah's voice, my initial sadness turned to anger. We need them to be arrested and to reflect on their actions. But more than that, the feeling of betrayal from the son I had raised and his wife I had loved deeply grew stronger. I wish they would see hell. The fact that I thought this scared me. Perhaps thinking this way makes me a bad parent. But maybe it's natural for a parent to feel this way. Robert and Sarah decided it was best we didn't meet John and Jane. My husband was furious and probably didn't want to see them, and they felt I might end up forgiving them if I saw them. That might not be the case. I'm pretty mad too. But it's also true that I might forgive them if they apologized. We left everything to Robert and Sarah and went home. It seems our grandchildren were with Sarah's mother who had come over to play, so there was nothing to worry about. They told us to rest and not worry about anything. That comforted me a lot. The next day, we got a call from the police. It seems John and Jane didn't admit to anything. But Robert managed to find out about the embezzlement and the amount within a day. Believe it or not, since their first year of marriage for about 10 years. They had been embezzling money, sometimes a few $100s each month, and sometimes larger amounts. In total, they had taken nearly $200,000. Hearing this, I felt like I was in total darkness. To think I had been deceived for so long. Sarah, who came over to console me, took care of the household chores and contacted the police on my behalf. It seems the kids are still being looked after by Sarah's mom. I feel terrible for causing them such trouble. Dave consulted with the police and filed a complaint. With this, both of them, especially John, are going to be arrested. I felt relieved, yet also full of regret. It's hard to describe, but thanks to Sarah, I managed to keep my sanity. In addition to that, both were arrested on other charges. The planted daffodils and Sarah's recorder served as undeniable evidence. Those two, acting like they didn't know anything. They didn't seem to show any remorse. The embezzlement was a criminal case, and Dave sued both John and Jane. The embezzled money seemed to have been spent by Jane on her male entertainer. Did John know about it? If he did, he's a complete fool. At the trial, the entertainer was called as a witness. Sure, her husband was set to be the next CEO, but I had no clue that money was stolen. I had no feelings for her beyond that of a client. She was just a high-paying customer. Hearing the entertainer's words, Jane lost her cool.
But you! You said you wanted to marry me! I supported your business!
Jane shouted.
What the hell are you talking about?
John shouted back. Come on, you've got to know that's just a sales pitch. It's absurd, said the entertainer, dismissing Jane. Serves her right. I couldn't help but almost laugh. From this, it seems John probably didn't know. Apparently, the money was sent to John's not-so-wealthy parents. What a fool, caught by such a silly woman. In the end, both were found guilty. As for Jane, she even got rejected by her beloved entertainer in front of everyone. After the trial, both Sarah and Dave were laughing out loud. Truly, what goes around comes around. I remember seeing Jane at a luxury store before. The man next to her must have been that entertainer. I wish I'd realized then, but well, all's well that ends well. The two were also indicted on other charges. With all the evidence stacked against them, their excuses didn't hold up. Of course, they were found guilty. While they were granted probation for these charges, they received actual prison sentences for the embezzlement. John cried and apologized to me. But I had no intention of forgiving him. He was fired from the company. All insurances and such were changed to have Dave as the beneficiary. My husband made it clear that he's making Dave his successor. John, now jobless, divorced Jane in prison. It's good that he's free from such a woman. I don't want anything to do with John anymore, but blood ties can't be severed. The police said family should support him to prevent reoffending, but John's an adult and that woman's out of the picture. I'm sure he can manage on his own without relying on elderly parents. Trust doesn't come back easily. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust John again in my lifetime. Afterwards, Robert took over my husband's job as his successor. I really owe Sarah a lot. If not for her, this matter might not have been resolved. To show my gratitude, I visited Sarah's home.
Granny!
My grandchildren ran to me with joy. Sarah said, sorry for the mess, and led me to the living room. It had been a while since I visited their house. But it looked tidy, hardly a mess. I was delighted to see a photo of my 3 grandkids, myself, and my husband displayed. Sarah, I can't thank you enough. I expressed my gratitude. Oh, I've just done what's expected of me, really. Sarah always said this in her usual calm manner. You know, I used to be uncomfortable around you, Sarah. You never really tried to get close to us, did you? That's why. I murmured softly. I knew you felt that way. But that's okay. Sarah responded. I truly care about the both of you. Sometimes, when personal emotions get involved, they might cause discomfort. That's why I believe it's important to maintain a certain distance. It's all for valuing the two of you. Her words deeply resonated with me. Jane always tried to butter me up, and I was foolish enough to dote on her. But I was truly foolish not to notice Sarah's sincere feelings towards us.
Granny, look! A gift!
My youngest grandchild, and exclaimed and handed me a folded paper.
I made it with Mommy before you came. I told her I wanted to make you a present and she helped me.
The small origami wasn't perfect, with some edges misaligned. But I cherished that simple piece of art dearly. Oh, and thank you. Granny is really happy. I'll treasure it. My words seemed to delight Anne. I'm glad Robert married Sarah. With her around, I know Robert and my grandchild are in good hands. Sarah, thank you so much. Let's keep supporting each other, okay? My grandchild, looking puzzled at my words, smiled with a twinkle in her eyes, seemingly influenced by my joy.